them suffer from preventable diseases. Since the overthrow of the Taliban, little has changed. For these people, life is just as dangerous. I found the population of 2 villages living destitute in the rubble of this shoe factory in Kabul. They'd fled attacks by warlords who'd robbed them and kidnapped their wives and daughters. I've spent much of my life in places of upheaval, but I've rarely seen such a bombed and blasted and ruined city as Kabul. Most of the damage was done not by the Taliban, but by the Afghan warlords backed and trained and funded by America for more than 20 years. The same warlords who have been effectively put back into power by George Bush. While Afghanistan's liberation from the Taliban was welcomed here and brought certain freedoms, such as the opening of schools and the playing of music, for many people, another kind of terror replaced it, one barely acknowledged in the West. And not only has the government in Kabul no power and no money, the president, Hamid Karzai, dares not leave his office without his 42 bodyguards from the US Special Forces. Real power is held by these men, warlords, whose record of repression and brutality is little different from the Taliban. Many Afghans regard them as no better. For 4 years from 1992, they fought each other for control of Kabul, killing 50,000 innocent people and smashing the city to rubble. By any definition, the warlords are terrorists, bribed by the Americans with a fortune in cash and truckloads of arms. Today they control the government in Kabul and have re-established the opium trade, from which comes most of the heroin reaching the streets of Britain. Now Human Rights Watch has broken the silence, documenting atrocities committed by gunmen and warlords who have essentially hijacked the country. Once again, the victims are often women.
Today, women are free and are part of Afghanistan's new government, and we welcome the new Minister of Women's Affairs, Dr. Seema Sumar.
Dr. Seema Sumar is a symbol of Afghan resistance and humanity. She defied the Taliban and ran clinics for women. In 2001, she and another woman were appointed to the new government as the face of liberation. But no sooner had the applause in Washington died away than she was forced out. The warlords were not tolerating such an outspoken voice of freedom for women. Today, Dr. Samar lives in constant fear of her life, with bodyguards with her night and day. No one understands more the plight of Afghan women.
It's not much change for them. They're still, the majority doesn't have access to health care. They don't have access to education. They don't have access to job opportunity.
The liberation of women in Afghanistan is mostly a sham, and their plight is desperate. Since the overthrow of the Taliban, Human Rights Watch has documented kidnapping and the mass rape of women, girls and boys. Girls' schools have been burned down. In the western city of Herat, women can be arrested if they drive, and if they are caught with an unrelated man, even a taxi driver, they may be subjected to a chastity test. This is Marina, a member of an extraordinary organization called the Revolutionary Women of Afghanistan, which has protected and educated women and documented their repression. We had to meet in secret. The veil was necessary to cover her identity.
We don't believe that there is much difference between the Taliban and the Northern Alliance, or the commanders who are now in power in different parts of Afghanistan. because the origin is the same. They believe in the same thing. Their nature is the same. They are the two faces of the same coin.
Women don't feel secure. The police are generally not functioning properly. Courts are not generally functioning properly. You have places where you have real deep fear of commanders and of armed groups. You have cases where women get taken by armed groups, where people become imprisoned in private jails. You have reports that men and women who are walking down the street get picked up almost at random to check whether or not they're married, to verify that they haven't been having illegal sexual intercourse.
Just a month back, these commanders raped women, and a group of 35 women jumped into the river along with their children, and they died just to save themselves from being raped again.
The starving, the wretched, the dispossessed, the ignorant, those living in want and squalor, from the deserts of northern Africa to the slums of Gaza to the mountain regions of Afghanistan, they too are our cause.
To a growing number of people around the world, America's war on terror is about hypocrisy and double standards, about terrorists classified as good and bad, depending on their usefulness to the great game of power politics. For years, Osama bin Laden was not only regarded in Washington and London as a good terrorist, he was virtually our creation. One of the most closely guarded secrets of the Cold War was America's role in supporting Afghan warlords known as the Mujahideen. The official story is that America backed these fundamentalists in response to the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in December 1979. But that's not true. It was 6 months before the Soviet invasion, in July of that year, that President Jimmy Carter authorized $500 million to help set up the Mujahideen, a terrorist organization. The American people were completely unaware that their government, together with the British Secret Service, MI6, had begun training and funding Islamic extremists, including Osama bin Laden. Out of this came the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, and September the 11th. Soon after the Taliban came to power in 1996, the administration of Bill Clinton backed a secret plan for a pipeline through Afghanistan from Central Asia, which has vast reserves of oil and gas. The Taliban were offered a generous cut in the deal and secretly invited to Washington and Texas. They were treated royally, taken shopping and flown to tourist attractions like the NASA Space Center and Mount Rushmore. Their tour was so secret that no television news covered it. Most Americans knew nothing. By the time George W. Bush came to power, the link between Al-Qaeda and the Taliban was an embarrassment, and September the 11th gave Bush an opportunity to get rid of them. Today, Afghanistan is run by a regime installed by the Americans, and the pipeline deal is going ahead. September the 11th also presented an opportunity to an influential group who, even by Republican Party standards, were extreme. Ray McGovern is a former senior officer of the Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA, and a personal friend of George Bush Sr., the president's father.
The same people who are running U.S. policy now are people that the president's father kept at arm's length. They were referred to in the circles in which I moved when I was briefing at the top intelligence and policy levels. They were referred to as the crazies. The crazies. I mean, you talk about the crazies, everyone knew who they were. Richard Pearl, Paul Wolfowitz, Doug Feith, those folks.
The crazies also include Donald Rumsfeld, seen here in Baghdad in 1986, warmly greeting Saddam Hussein, who was then being armed to the teeth by America and Britain.